like to start.
Oh.
I'd like I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm joining you from the traditional ancestral and unceded territories of the Musqueam Nation at the University of British Columbia on the west coast of what is now known as Canada. And working as an uninvited guest on this territory inspires me to prioritize and assert Indigenous sovereignty and governance in my research and teaching, as well as to listen, learn, and support the Musqueam Nation. Um, Before proceeding, I'd like to start with an abbreviated version of the Aramat prayer. So, in your own ways, please acknowledge and give thanks to the land, people, and spirits that guide and protect your work. Additionally, I want to remind you, as you probably heard, that we are recording the audio and screen for this webinar. We may or may not share this as a vodcast or video in the future, but we're recording it just in case. If you have any issues with this, please hold back from participating in the chat or asking questions on screen. So for those of you who don't know, the Aramat project is a large interdisciplinary and international collaboration. Its goal is to connect Indigenous organizations, nations, and researchers on a global scale to address this idea of how do Indigenous relationships with land support both biodiversity and community and health well-being. The project is supported by a number of innovations and mechanisms. This includes primarily funding Indigenous-led place-based projects led by Indigenous communities around the world. We also offer training and methodological toolboxes. And the last one is having these 10 global transformation pathways, of which we are one of them. You could learn more about this at aramatproject.org, and I think we can add that to the chat later. So this webinar, as I mentioned, is supported by Global Transformation Pathway T5, Decolonizing Science and Education. The goal of our pathway is to see how Indigenous leadership in science and education impacts or is necessary to support not only biodiversity, but community health and well-being. This pathway is supported by three co-leads, myself, Dr. Kim Tallbear, and Dr. Mai-Britt Omen. Do you want to say hello very quickly?
Hi all. I'm in Sámi territories in Stockholm.
Hi, I'm Kim Tallbear. For those who don't know me, I'm coming to you from Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, which is Dakota homelands, and I'm at the University of Minnesota. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah. So on to the webinar. We keep calling it a webinar, but we're trying to reconceptualize this as a Káffidit or cafe talk, as you would say in Sámi language. I mentioned in Cree, we'd call this a kitchen coffee chat or tawau pitagwe, which means welcome and come in. And it's just to say that this is an important and meaningful conversation, and it can happen in everyday life. And we wanted to mirror that in this discussion series by exploring how Indigenous leadership is important in science and education. I'll just mention that the structure of this Káffidit, we're going to start with a 20-minute presentation by our speaker, Anastasia Ulturgasheva, who's an Ewen and Lamut scholar at the University of Uppsala. Thank you for joining us, Anastasia. And this will be followed by some first comments and questions from Elle Eriksson, a Sámi scholar at the University of Umeå. And then after this, we'll open the floor to questions and comments from the audience. So on to the talks. I'm pleased to introduce Anastasia, and who will be presenting a talk on throwing a lasso into the future, Eveny reindeer herders lasso making in the Republic of Sakha, Yakutia. So Anastasia, please take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. I'm going to share my screen now. It should be working. So I'm sorry about my slow technology. Yes. So I would like to first to mention that this presentation draws on chapter 8 of my doctoral thesis, Crafting Futurities on Thawing Grounds, based on ethnographic fieldwork with Eveny reindeer herders in the Republic of Sakha, Yakutia, Russia. Maybrit was one of my examiners at my defense. So let me start with a scene from August 2022 near the village of Sakha in northeastern Siberia. The rising waters reshaped the landscape near the village, disrupting established routes and limiting mobility. Swelling rivers and washed out roads significantly complicated the journey to the nearest reindeer herding camp near Lake Kugulur. Although the camp was merely 15 kilometers from the village, the altered conditions rendered usual vehicles ineffective on the waterlogged terrain. Despite economic constraints and geographical remoteness from major centers of vehicle innovations, local communities actively integrate available means of transportation to address their daily needs and respond creatively to drastic environmental changes. Quad bikes are specifically designed, large tires like the one that you see. Inflatable boats exemplify this adaptive approach. This transition from using reindeer sledges to modern vehicles, so-called modern vehicles, and snowmobiles, motorcycles, to what I call a hybrid system that combines both traditional, quote-unquote, traditional and contemporary methods suitable for navigating water and land, marks a pivotal moment. To reach Lake Kugulur, we had to cross several small rivers. When we left the village, the day was sunny and warm, ideal weather for a trip. About 2 to 3 kilometers from the camp, Pavel, our quad bike driver, asked us to continue on foot. The terrain ahead was uneven, and he wanted to avoid the risk of the quad bike overturning. Given that the average cost of a quad bike starts from 1 million rubles, around 12,000 USD, and most people purchase them on loan, we understood his concern and began gathering our belongings. Although the walk was not long, we had a significant amount of gear with us. As I carried Heruki, reindeer hide bags, from the quad bike to the inflatable boat, Mikhail told me, "You should start walking around the lake now. It will take you some time, take my maut." I asked him, why would I need a lasso to walk around the lake? His reply was firm. Every person in the taiga must always carry a lasso. As I began walking, I reflected on the significance of always carrying a lasso. Did I really need a lasso just to walk around the lake? By the time I arrived at the campsite, Mikhail has already crossed the lake and began unloading the boat to set up our tent. Approaching the camp, I saw Mikhail and Valentin waving at me and pointing to the lasso I was carrying, humorously remarking, "See, he brought you here." For Mikhail, carrying the maut, the lasso was not incidental to the journey, it was part of it. The lasso had gathered the relationships between me, him, reindeer, Valentin, reindeer hide, who's it made from, and the spirits of the landscape that made a safe passage possible. Before I go further, a brief word on the context and on who I am in relation to this material. So this is a rough map. The Eveny Tungus Manchu-speaking indigenous minority of 17,000 people scattered across the Arctic and subarctic districts of the Republic of Sakha, Yakutia, Chukotka, Kamchatka, and some parts beyond. This is not a great map, but it shows the blue dots show on the map show where I conducted my fieldwork. So, and just to comparison, there's a Moscow to see the distance between. This is much more different map. And this is where I did my field work. So most of the Eveny communities are based around Verkhoyansk range, where I did my fieldwork in the Republic of Sakha. The Republic of Sakha Yakutia is also one of Russia's most mineral-rich regions. Diamonds, gold, rare earth minerals, and most of those deposits sit beneath indigenous territories. The result is a landscape under simultaneous pressures from permafrost thaw, extractive industry, and a Russian state that historically treated indigenous lands as resource depots. I was born in Yakutsk and split my childhood between the city and my family's Eveny reindeer herding village. My mother is Eveny. I grew up partly in the care of my grandparents there before moving to the UK at 11. This fieldwork was my longest return since childhood. I mentioned this not to claim in unimmediate access. Insider status brings its own obligations and constraints, but because the knowledge shared with me emerged through kin relations, not despite them. It is against this backdrop I want to think about a lasso. I want to argue that lasso is not a relic of the past, but a future-making technology, one that challenges dominant technoscientific assumptions about what counts as knowledge, what counts as technology, and who gets to participate in the making futures. The problem at hand, the futuring indigenous worlds. Dominant technoscience operates through what John Law calls the one world world logic, a universalizing assumption that treats technoscientific description as reality and reduces indigenous world making to mere cultural perspective. He doesn't write about indigenous world making, but I add on top of his analysis. Well, conceptual framework. Within this frame, objects like the lasso get museumified. They appear in ethnographic museums as vestiges of a bygone era. What Robert Speer called dull in imaginative myopic interpretations that generalize from the particular and strip objects of their relational life. But these objects are not relics of fading culture. They're integral to the continuing practice and futures of Eveny life. Envisioning indigenous design futures is fraught within today's techno-colonialist milieu. This milieu systematically defutures alternative designs, including indigenous ones, raising possibilities for sustainable human and other human futures. In this settled colonial imagination, indigenous peoples are not only consigned to the past, but also denied a place in the future. This delegitimization operates through what Brian Pfaffenberger calls standard view of technology. The assumption that technology is a neutral set of tools advancing along a single progressive trajectory, naturally displacing whatever came before. Within this view, the lasso is not technology, but a technique, a primitive, small scale, destined for replacement. The snowmobile is technology. It is modern, rational, pointing forward. Their coexistence can only appear as a transitional moment on the way to full modernization, never as a stable, generative combination of different ontological worlds. This produces a structural double bind for reindeer herders from the Russian state, which argues which constantly reduces Eveny practices as either which constantly delegitimizes Eveny practices, whether they adopt modern technologies or refuse them. Adopt the snowmobile and you are assimilating, losing authenticity. Keep the lasso and you are museum piece. This double bind is not a neutral description of a transitional society. It is an active mechanism of eliminatory logic, one that makes the coexistence of different ontological worlds politically and legally invisible. For Eveny reindeer herders, the making of the maut is not an abstract aspiration, it is what they do every time. So let me take the making of the maut seriously, because the making itself is the argument. A maut is a lasso made of reindeer hide, typically 16 to 18 meters long. The strongest ropes come from the autumn hide of mature male reindeer. The skin is thickest then. The hide is cut into a continuous strap, soaked for 2 to 3 days in chalmi, a broth made from reindeer offal, then stretched, twisted, and dried for 5 to 7 days. After drying, the rope is rubbed with marmot fat and left outdoors for another 3 to 4 days. Then it is kneaded by hand for 10 days, sometimes with a ring scraper, which the strap is pulled at an angle until the hide becomes supple. It's a slow, demanding work. And as Michael said, if you throw a maut and it tangles, it wasn't made well. What I want to draw attention to is the knowledge order this process embodies. This knowledge is never written down. Oftentimes it's not written down. Children observe it in reindeer herding camps, or in this case, this is a picture I made of children, kindergarten competition of children, where they were throwing a maut. By watching, so children observe it by watching and working alongside parents and elders. To describe it here, as I am doing, is partial and even inadequate. I'm translating embodied relational knowledge into the propositional form that academic discourse requires. In a way, it is this is the challenge to the standard view of technology that I want to press. Technoscience claims rigor through replicability, abstraction, and inscription, knowledge that can be written down, standardized, and transmitted across contexts. The maut's knowledge resists all of this. It is irreducibly particular, dependent on the specific reindeer, the specific season, the specific hands. It requires what Michael described as feeling the wood with your hands, or looking it, touching it, an embodied sensory awareness that can be reduced to a protocol. This is not irrationality. It is different rationality, one that takes seriously the agency of materials and other than human beings as co-participants in knowledge production. And crucially, it is technology in the fullest sense, a sophisticated, adaptive, generative system for living in the Arctic. The standard view of technology cannot see this. This is not limitation of the lasso, it is limitation of the standard view. So let me be concrete about the claim that maut makes futures. To how exactly is a maut a future-making technology? I want to identify 4 mechanisms. First, the making process is itself future-oriented. The making of the maut takes weeks. You are producing something for future use, future journeys, future reindeer not yet caught, future relations yet not enacted. Michael's caution that a tangled maut reveals poor making is a statement about future performance, not a present craft. Every stage of the process, the soaking, the twisting, and the kneading, is an investment in a future that the lasso maker will not fully control, but is nonetheless preparing for. Second, the maut is a medium of intergenerational transmission. Children learn to make and throw a maut by watching, following instructions, then doing it alongside parents and elders. This is not a transfer of information, it is the making of a future reindeer herder. Each time a child learns to throw a loop, a maut at a wooden stake or at a wooden reindeer before handling a reindeer, a future is being rehearsed. The lasso does not just connect the herder to the reindeer in the present, it connects the present generation to the next one. Knowledge kept alive in this way is not archived, it is performed, and in being performed, it ensures its own continuations. Third, carrying the maut activates Julie Chen, what Olga Ulturgasheva describes as a spirit that travels ahead. Among the Eveny, once a journey is contemplated, a portion of one's spirit is dispatched to prepare its way ahead. The lasso is not merely symbolic of this, it is infrastructural to it. When Mikhail insisted I carry the lasso, he wasn't being superstitious. He was ensuring that the future route was being prepared, that the relations between human and other human beings necessary for safe passage were being gathered and activated. The lasso is technology for dispatching the future ahead of you. Fourth, the maut's continued making is itself a futurity claim. The fact that it is still being made and used alongside snowmobiles, quad bikes, and inflatable boats refutes the standard view of technology. Timeline in practice, not just in theory. Eveny herders are not waiting to be modernized. The coexistence of the maut and snowmobile is not a transitional arrangement. It is a stable, generative combination of different technologies for living in the Arctic. Every lasso made today is a statement that this specific world that Eveny reindeer herders enact continues and will continue. Kim Tolbert's processual notion of making kin and Laura Harder's concept of kin space-time envelope help us name what is happening across all four mechanisms. Kin-making practices transcend linear time, sustaining relational continuity across past, present, and future. The lasso operates exactly this way, but the theoretical language should not obscure the ethnographic point. The future is being made in the taiga, in the specific, slow, demanding work of turning reindeer hide into a lasso. What ruptures is not technology adoption, but extractivism. When mining companies disrupt reindeer migration routes, reindeer simply leave. Domestication in the Eveny understanding is not ownership. It is a reciprocal agreement that can be revoked. When that agreement is broken, the future making stops. This is what actually at stake. So let me return where I started. Mikhail handed me the maut not because he thought I needed to catch a reindeer, but because carrying it was a form of participation in a relational world, one in which humans, other than human beings, materials and spirits, and landscape are bound together in ongoing obligations of care. The lasso gathered relations that made the journey safe. It dispatched the future ahead of me. Against John Law's one world logic of dominant technoscience, I have shown three things. First, the double bind Eveny reindeer herders face, delegitimized whether they adopt modern technologies or refuse them, is not a neutral description, but an active eliminatory mechanism rooted in standard view of technology. Second, that the lasso makes futures through four concrete mechanisms: the future orientation of its making, the intergenerational transmission it enacts, the activation of Julie Chen, and it lasso's continued existence as a refusal of the standard view's timeline. And third, that what is at stake is not simply cultural survival, but cosmopolitical survival. The capacity of humans, other than human beings, such as reindeer, spirits, and landscapes, to sustain reciprocal relations into the future. The threat to Eveny futurity does not come primarily from new technologies, modern technologies. It comes from the eliminatory logic that renders the coexistence of different ontological worlds invisible, and from the extractivist practice that destroys ancestral lands. The maut, by contrast, the lasso, insists on how futures should be made, carefully, slowly, through embodied attention, and its typical application. Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia. I'm just trying to figure out how to do some clap emojis, but I can't figure it out right now. But thank you. This is very, very interesting talk. Just looking at that landscape, it was just very familiar to northern Canada where I grew up, and so it was very nice to see some photos, and thank you for sharing that.
I'm sorry if I spoke too fast.
No, it's coffee talk. And there's no right or wrong way to do coffee talk. I thought you said it really well when you posed the question of who gets to participate in the making or defining of technology, and this is a really important theme we see throughout. So with this, I'll hand it over to Ella for some initial comments or questions or response to the presentation, and from there we'll move on to questions. So Ella, please.
Yes, thank you, Warren, and Gato Enas. Thank you so much, Anastasia, for this your very nice presentation. And yeah, it was so interesting to see so many similarities to how the situation is there and how the Sámi people, my people is the similarities we share with this. And I was reflecting about what the maut, the lasso, would be in a Sámi context, because of course we also have the lasso, which in Sámi is called sopan. But I was thinking maybe it would be a knife, nibi, because that also feels like, but with a knife you use it for reindeer herding, for collecting plants, for carving into trees. So I think that would be that it could be a similar for the Sámi. And I was also thinking about this the double bind you were talking about, that no matter if you adopt or refuse technology, that you are still what's the word? Yeah, but that you are seen as like either assimilated or like starting to get assimilated, or that you are holding on to these outdated traditions from like a Western point of view. So I have a couple of questions, and my first question is if you could talk a bit about because I am very interested as well in the transmission of traditional knowledge between generation, and I found it very interesting when you were talking about the maut as a medium for this intergenerational knowledge exchange. So if you could talk a bit more about the of course you explained the overall process and the steps, but more, I guess, from a practical point of view, or maybe describe a typical situation where that knowledge transmission would take place.
Thank you, Elle. Before I answer your question, thank you so much for your kind comments. I kind of have to go back to when I was writing the thesis, because as I was reading out loud my own paper, I realized I never actually explained why I chose a lasso instead of any other object. And I think my project started when I went to the museum in St. Petersburg in Russia, ethnographic museum, and they had this, what is it called? They had an exhibition called Arctic is not empty, right? Or something like, oh no, it was called Arctic is habitable or inhabitable land. So it already kind of portrays particular ideas. And they put a lot of garments of every Russian of Siberian indigenous minorities, and they're combining and then making look like as if the exchange between Russian Cossacks and the indigenous peoples was very like, you know, a friendly exchange of gifts. But what I was noticed that there was a lasso and a reindeer sledge and no description. Everything else was labeled or, you know, related to something, but those two objects were just, it is part of it, but it was not, no one engaged with it seriously. And that's where my curiosity came. Like, you know, the thesis is going to be about climate change, but I'm also very curious about those mundane objects that for Eveny reindeer herders, and I guess for Sámi reindeer herders, they're just part of everyday life, but somehow, but it's not interesting for researchers, right? Somehow those, they're not exciting, they don't produce like big theories, and therefore no one looked at those stuff. So that's where it starts. But then I was wondering, like, people still use it. What does it say? Eveny reindeer herders, they still use, they could get nylon maut, but they do not, right? They could have ditched reindeer sledges made out of birch for plastic ones and the metal ones, but it's continued practice. So I think that's where I'm coming to a question. I think that's where the transmission across through intergeneration transmission is taking place, because it's not necessarily because they want to defy the government, the Russian state. It's happening as part of how it is to live on the land. And I think that's where it lies. I think if it was very specific, like, and to live on the land, you have to have the skills of making those items, or of making those items because it's about your own well-being in the taiga, in this particular part of the world. And I believe that, and I think it comes from living in the area, and that's how intergenerational transmission of knowledge taking place, because it would be very difficult to do this when you're not living there. I mean, that's how I don't know how to make any of those things, because so I don't think I adequately answered your question, but I think that's what my general ideas in transmission of intergeneration transmission of knowledge.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, I think it was a good answer, because I agree with you that like the land is such an important component in this, and that it's very hard when you, for like whatever reason, get detached from your traditional territory, that it's very hard to be a part of that knowledge transmission. So yeah, I think it was a good answer. And then you were very kind to send me your thesis, so I have had a look at it, and I was thinking, you wrote that by honoring relations with reindeer and other than human beings, they assert that the world is relational and responsive. And I was, very intrigued by that. And I was thinking if you could describe with what you mean when you say that the world is responsive.
I think I always go back to a context and then I start answering questions. Sorry for my tendency. There's idea that in dominant technoscience is idea that the world is just a background, right? Whereas what I observed among Eveny reindeer herders, they don't say it this way. Just once again, it's just me, right, putting my academic hat, and sometimes like whatever they tell me, and I'm like, okay, we can translate it into academic into academic text. We can, which is also inadequate in a way. So we have one idea that the world is a background, and then we have completely different worldview. Well, no, it's not world, its ontological experience of where the world responds back to you in the way that reindeer responds to the herder. But also it goes back to how, as I said, domestication is not ownership. And in one of my chapters I write about, there was the case of herd of wild reindeer taking domesticated reindeer with them and going away. And then it was really funny when this diamond extraction company was using helicopters to help the reindeer herders to find the reindeer. And then as I talk about, like, you know, it's all about reciprocal relations. And this is the same diamond company that pushes reindeer and reindeer herders away from the territories, that was trying to help them to find back those reindeer. And one of the reindeer herders saying, like, oh, reindeer do not know that they are domesticated, right? For them, it is their world. And I think when it comes to Eveny reindeer herders, they take seriously the idea that reindeer has agency in a way that almost it is in the practice. It's not the herder that leads a reindeer, at least in the case for the Eveny reindeer herders. It is a reindeer that leads the herder, and the herder has to follow the reindeer. So I think that's where it's the ethnographic examples would be of how the world is responsive, how it would respond, and comes into like everyday practices.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So for my last question, and I see that Kim was also interested in this. When in your presentation you said that extractivism raptures futures, and I also think that ties very closely to the conclusion of your thesis when you are talking about a future beyond the exploitations and pressure that comes from these frontiers. So if you could say something more about that, and what you would imagine that a future beyond this would be.
I think I don't agree in everything that Isabel Stenger's writes on cosmopolitics, but I think the main takeaway that I enjoy from her work is we need to slow down and imagine slowing down in thinking, which sounds very bad, but we need to imagine different futures where extraction doesn't rupture futures. It doesn't involve just indigenous peoples. It kind of involves the entire world, because there's an assumption that like only certain people, only marginalized people will experience further marginalization and environmental harm, but it affects everything and everyone. So, wow, it's a very loaded question. Thank you. But I finished my thesis on a positive note because I was trying to be, because everyone writes about futures, about, especially in Russia, when it comes to indigenous peoples, every time when it comes to the futures of indigenous peoples in Russia, it's always, they're gonna disappear. They will disappear, right? State and say that this is the last peoples that remained. And therefore it was important for me, at least in the context of Russian settler colonialism and Siberian indigenous peoples, is to assert that people will continue living. And it's always said, and whenever I talked with elders, they always say that, oh, in the news, in the media, they always write that our languages are disappearing, we are people are disappearing. And I think in the thesis, I tried to push for the opposite. But sometimes I get caught thinking this way as well, right? It's kind of like, only a certain amount of people are involved in the activism, and even a certain amount of people have write about it in scholarly discourse. So I think it is, for me, an effort, right? I mean, I'm not really necessarily good, but it's very important to imagine different futures, even for your own sake. Not necessarily, maybe not for paper or thesis, but for my everyday life. I always imagine what could be. And this, what could be, helps me to think about material differently, think of or engage with certain theories in a different way. Because sometimes it's, when I was when I started my PhD, I would really thought that STS, well, not certain STS, but like could be, new materialisms, particularly. I thought new materialism could provide me with the vocabulary, right? And then as I read more, I realized, well, even the way they paint future is not what I imagined. And I think it's important exercise to imagine alternative futures, maybe both intellectually and for yourself, because then it becomes a driving force to push the boundaries. And as I was talking to Maypreet before my defense, how a year before my defense, I was talking about how, in your thesis, you have to push boundaries because everyone will push back to you, and therefore you have to really go a bit creative, as much as creative as possible, because everyone will push your boundaries back. So I think as Indigenous PhDs, I recommend you to go a little bit come up with your own concepts, come up, do your own, reinterpretation of texts, because your supervisors will push on you, your examiners will push on you. So the exercise of imagining different futures is also helpful to me, was helpful in finishing this thesis. So sorry if I'm taking for so long to answer the question.
No, it's super nice to hear you reflect about this. So yes, I'm really happy with your answers. Yeah, very thought provoking, and yeah, for now, as you said, lastly, for me as also being an Indigenous PhD student, I feel very inspired by your work, and yeah, hope to do something really good myself.
Yes, we should see each other on coffee.
Yes, definitely.
Excellent. Thank you, Ella, and thank you, Anastasia. So we'll just move over and open up the chat for discussion or comments or questions from the attendees and also from Kim and Mybrit. If you have any other questions, I'm hoping that people can use the chat. I haven't played with this webinar format yet, but can people give me some indication if the chat is functioning? Maybe raise your hands if you have questions. I see it's working. Okay, thank you, Henrik. Henrik says, thank you for the presentation and for the questions from Ella. Are there any other questions or comments from the
Can
audience?
I just ask, because I got really confused, is it rapture futures, like the rapture? I needed to check on Google Translate, or is it rupture with RU? Is it RA or RU? Because it's quite different.
Rupture, the one that breaks futures.
Breaking,
yeah.
okay, because that's,
Yeah.
but I was just thinking now where you were saying push the boundaries, that would be exciting. Extractivist is rapturing the futures.
Yeah.
That was
Wait a second.
because
What
that
did I write? Did I write a rupture?
with the A, and that's
it's with the A. Sorry, it is with the A. No, I just made.
No, but I was thinking when you were talking, that's also quite, because it's when you were talking about this, how it's kind of like pushing boundaries, and then thinking about extractivism as rapturing futures, that they made me think, because it's kind of, for me, extractivism is it's destroying so much that it's it's destroying itself in the end. So maybe that's the rapture. I was thinking. I don't know.
Yeah,
I just got me thinking.
it is, yeah, I think it is both. I'm sorry, I'm getting anxious. I've been talking for a little bit longer than I usually do. So no, but yeah, yes, I think it is destruction of itself, but also destruction of the world. But people don't mind this. Actually, certain Christian groups are looking forward to the end of the world because this would mean Jesus would come back. But you know, I'm not religious in that sense.
Thank you.
Good. So we have a few questions on here. One from Susanna just saying thanks for the interesting talk. Another from Brianna who asked, where can we find your thesis? Is it something that's publicly available yet?
Because I want to publish a monograph, it's not available in PDF, but like I have physical copies that I can send out to people. So since in Sweden we get our theses printed as books, but it is a thesis monograph, not a monograph. So
okay, so we'll have to stay tuned for that. For if you or when you publish, that will be very exciting.
I'm working on it, and rewriting your thesis for a monograph is a very different experience. Like I have to change so much. I thought it's going to be easy. It's not. It's very difficult.
And then Kim asks, are there any academic articles yet that you have published or that we can assign in class?
Oh no, I just defended this January, and whilst I was writing my thesis, I was just writing my thesis. I mean, I'm not, I wish I was more productive in writing. I know some people do this, where they write the thesis and then they combine the chapters and send it to, I'm slow thinker, I'm a slow thinker, unfortunately. Thank you. But thank you, Kim, for asking and for being here.
I was wondering because I don't know, Anastasia, if that's okay with you. For teaching, I have your PDF, so I could take out a chapter and use it for teaching. I don't know if anyone else would want to do that. Can they contact you, or you prefer to wait for the moment, like the book?
You know, academic world is very interesting place. I'm yet to get published, and therefore kind of want to keep my ideas concentrated in one thing, in one thesis. That I mean, I trust you, Maybury, that I wouldn't mind if you share as like a PDF because I think it would be better. Because some of the chapters are not as standalone chapters that don't really make sense. It requires a lot of like all the explanation before that certain like at least for today's paper I didn't talk about. I mean, I didn't explain why lots of people in Russia disagree that subjugation of Siberia was settler colonialism. They agree that it was colonialism, but they don't say it's settler colonialism, right? So like in my thesis, I have like chapter dedicating to explaining it, why it's a settler colonialism and not just internal colonialism, which I dislike, because then this Russian scholar, he wrote about internal colonialism, and then Russian nationalists took it and ran as like, oh yeah, all these other ethnic groups colonizing Russian culture and turning Russian peoples to their cultures. I don't know, it's insane. So, but yeah, I think my thesis, it's better to give it as PDF as an entire text, because it's
so people can write to standards. So people can write to you and ask, and then you can decide for each request if you will send it or not. Yeah,
I think that would be the best. I tried this year to do the writing and publishing. I don't know. It's hard whilst you're making jobs.
Yeah, so they can find you on the name that you see on the screen and Uppsala University, so they can find your email, or if you want to write it in the chat maybe. So then you can decide on the request what it's going to be used for, and also that anyone who is asking for it can also state what they're planning to do with it. So it's not official.
That would be for the best.
Yeah.
I had a massive fight in my department. Not in a fight, but it was like, it has to be available online. But I'm like, and also when it comes to Russia, even if Eveny communities are so small. It's so easy to identify the villages. It's literally, and it's so I don't want to now with the geopolitical situation. I don't want to put my interlocutors just because I write my thesis and do the whole theoretical thinking. It is the real people that would be put in danger. So therefore, I was like, I mean, I'm fine with people having a physical copy. I'm not so sure about PDF because I can't control who's going to read it. Even, I mean, in one case, you can't even control a physical copy, but at least I put some limits.
Yeah, totally understandable. I think the question from Henrik, will you read it, Warren?
Yeah, so we have a question from Henrik, a practical question. Do they have big herds of reindeer in your area, or are they smaller for personal use? And also, are they milking reindeer in your area?
They milk reindeer. Depends what's big for you. For some parts of Russia, 100 is like, in my case, in the Republic of Sakha, having more than 50 reindeers is like a big herd. In some parts of Siberia, 50 reindeer herd is like not like it's not big. So so it depends. But if you count 100 reindeer herds as big, then I would say most of the reindeer herds are small.
I don't know, Henrik, if you want to chat with that, or if not, that's okay. I wonder, let me see if I click this button. Oh, you have the freedom to chat if you want, Henrik. Oh, there you go.
He said he's happy on the answer.
Okay, I think you should
Thank
be
you,
able
Henrik,
to.
for asking the question.
I think if you unmute, you should be able to talk.
But he says I'm happy with the answer.
Oh, he's happy with you. Okay, never mind.
But he can check in. You want to say something, Henrik?
No, I'm just interested about because I have some Siberian other reindeer herders here visiting, so I was just interested how it is between the people in the Siberia, because they have more smaller herds where they're milking and have to driving the sleds with the reindeers and these things.
Yeah.
They have
Then the reindeers ride on their reindeer as well. So I think this also kind of the herds. And in the taiga, you can't really have too much of. You cannot really have a big herd because they get lost in the forest and then you lose them anyways.
Yeah, thank you.
That's really interesting. How do they learn? Like, they must be stronger. It's another, how do you say it? Another type of reindeer that is stronger than those that we have here.
Well, I mean, they're different types of reindeer, right? It's not, I mean, according to biology, they're not the same. They're not the same reindeer, but they kind of look similar. I don't know. You could say Eveny people are just like shorter, or you could say that they're stronger reindeer. But I think it could be stronger reindeer. But that's a different practice of reindeer herding, and it doesn't mean that reindeer are stronger. Maybe just about different technique, right?
Henrik wants to say
Technology.
Henrik, please.
no, I think it's the same reindeer. It's just that it's maybe the people are not so heavy, so they can carry the people.
But I think that's a question to Elle and Henrik. They say, I've heard that the forest reindeer here, compared to the mountain reindeer, is kind of different. It's stronger and bigger.
It is. You see it different when it's mixed with the mountain reindeers. You see directly which you don't need to see the mark on them. You just see on the size.
Yeah, mountain reindeers, where I did my fieldwork. They are the most common type of reindeer.
They're smaller, right?
The mountain reindeer is smaller here,
Yeah.
at least. Our is bigger, but our are not as good as on digging. They are more lazy, the forest reindeer, because they have the hanging lichen, so they're going after that instead of digging. When the mountain reindeer is here, at least digging until they die. Ours start walking as fast as it's little hard ground.
So they walk away to find something else.
Yes, they are lazy, the forest reindeer. They have other options. It's like when you're going to a restaurant. It's, they can choose. They have different. In the mountains, they only have the lichen in the ground, so they have no choices.
Interesting.
Thank you, Henrik. Kim has a question.
Yeah, you mentioned something about the new materialist language, envisioning different futures. Can you say more about that and maybe the general limitations of that theoretical language for your work?
I actually used, thank you. I mean, I'm so honored for you to be here. I actually used one of your articles to talk about the limitation of secular language, of new materialisms and insistence on being neutral, right? And like being scientific and how, because initially when I in Uppsala, I think 2020 was a particular period of time in academia where new materialism was like a new big thing, like a new and I was really inspired. I thought this would be the way I could write about reindeer herding without falling into the quote unquote traps of animism, right? And I would not have to engage with those old anthropological classical texts, and I could do like a new thing. And that's how I gone to fieldwork, thinking that's how I'm going to do it, using new materialisms vocabulary, agency, how to write about agency. But then the reality was different. Reindeer herders don't talk. When the reindeer herders don't talk in secular language about reindeer, it's really it's impossible. So my ethnography pushed me out and to think about new materialism's vocabulary differently and limitations of it and how it is not the representative. They're talking about different ontological world, right? How they engage with the world is different.
So did you find that, I don't know what the language, are you working in their language as well as Russian, or what languages are you working in when you're doing field work?
Russian and Eveny.
And so I would imagine, is it Eveny? Is that how you say it? The language?
Yeah.
Eveny. So I imagine in that language there are words to describe things that don't fall into a secular religious binary like they do in English, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you use have you tried to theorize out of the Eveny language back into what are you writing where did you write your dissertation, in Swedish?
In English, sorry,
In
I don't speak Swedish.
English. Yeah, so that's interesting, right? Did you theorize from that indigenous language back into your English academic writing? Because I wonder if that enables you to get past that binary, because I think it's the binary between the secular and the religious that hinders European language thinking around these things, right? That I just don't think is probably present in indigenous languages in the same way.
I agree with you. The problem is when you translate even the words into Russian or English, you fall into binary.
Right. And so that's where the kind of maybe the theoretical language, I think you can do it, but as with poetry or philosophy, it's ends up being this really complicated, convoluted kind of way of speaking, right? Maybe. So
Exactly.
anyway, I think that's very interesting. If you did any of that, I think that, I know it would be complicated translations and impenetrable to many people, but I think that would be quite interesting too.
Yeah, and I just wanted to finish my thesis. It was the 5th year, and I was like, I have to do it. I have to finish it. And once maybe in the book, but I don't think it's even possible. Like in the monograph, it has to be something more as where I really slow down and think. So maybe not as early researcher, but a little bit more experience, because even though you think 5 years is enough, is not really enough. You're kind of being rushed through this time. And then I read Isabel Stenges, and she said, we have to slow down, think, like we have to slow down and start like have different thinking. I'm like, I don't have time. I'm running out of funding.
Yeah, I mean, the dissertation, then I'll stop. The dissertation is the best. My advisor told me the best dissertation is a done dissertation. You have plenty of time to do this other work, better that you're getting paid for it as a postdoc or an assistant professor and doing that work. But I would encourage you to think about an article where you're actually thinking about that language and the translation from the indigenous language into English in a way that's intervening, because the new materialisms are limited by their commitment to secularism, right? And that whole idea that the secular and the quote unquote religious can be divided, it's an artifact of European thinking that I think, so that could be a really interesting intervention, just that could come out of your work later. But I agree, that might be something you do when you fulfill the other more basic requirements of getting your first job and a postdoc and all that other stuff. So anyway, it was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim Tolbe. I really appreciate your enthusiasm for my work. Thank you so much, and Maybritt, of course, for your support.
Yeah, and I must say that I was really happy to read about the spiritual that you actually wrote about it. Not much, but it's mentioned, because it's that's like even talking about spirituality in Swedish academia or European is really hard, because it's like you're just supposed to explain it as like it's how to say, I don't know how to explain it, but it's that it's not real. It's not reality.
Yeah, and with
I think that was really
have...
great in that you're describing it. It's reality. It's not just something.
Yeah, and I think sometimes different geographies and people describe spirits very differently. So, and I think with Eveny reindeer herders, because they experienced Soviet Union and the whole, like, everyone has to be atheist, right? And this is where sometimes ambiguity comes. So like they don't really, because they had to make sure they don't seem religious by the state to protect themselves, but it's also was not possible for not to use certain words. So I think with time and like the Soviet Union, the language itself developed, like the way people talk about things have become very different. And I mean, sometimes it's really funny. You talk to reindeer herders and ask them like if they believe in anything, and they say they don't, but then they do a lot of things that say like, oh yeah, you practice your spiritual beliefs. Like, no, it's just for good luck. And it's like, okay, fine.
Yeah, come across a bit, and well, in my own life, and also in like when doing research. But I'm still like careful. I can't really talk about it, like not in academia. I can talk about it with other indigenous persons and scholars, but not in academia. So that's something I would like to push for a bit, because as part of decolonizing science.
Yeah, and Uppsala University is not really friendly to this kind of. There's a whole department of theology, which has different departments, faculty of theology within different departments of theology. I was really confused in the beginning. I was like, wow.
Yeah, well, that's sort of actually somehow I'm trying to go into that now somehow, because they are training what do you say, the clergy. They're training clergy.
Yeah, exactly.
And they actually have clergy as part of scholars. So that's quite exciting too. So we are having a conference in September. So I have a person we're going to talk about some parts of spirituality with a scholar from the Department of Theology. So that will be really exciting too. So that there is hope for possibility of talking about something else than secular.
Yeah, well, I guess because my background, I'm a little bit skeptical of Christianity. So when I moved to the UK when I was small, I was really shocked by the whole like Christmas thing. I was like, what is this? There's only one big celebration, it's New Year's, and that's it.
Right. Yeah. Well, Sámi have been Christians for 1,000 years, but brought also the Sámi traditional spirituality parallel. Of course, there are people who are not Christians as well, but it's been there as part of.
I think this would be very interesting to have edited volume on, like, certain, like in Russia, who during the Soviet Union everyone's like no religion, and how in Siberian indigenous groups continued with the spiritual practices without being involved in religion. And then the other part of the world.
So we just have, just looking at the time, I think some people are starting to trickle out and saying their thanks in the chat. Veronica says, thank you for an interesting presentation and great discussion. And I'll just give one final call out. If anybody has any sort of final remarks or questions they'd like to say. And we just lots more thank yous. I think this was a very interesting talk, Anastasia, and thank you, Ella, for your comments, and gave us lots to think about. We're very excited to see your work when it's ready to be shared publicly, and so keep on it.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you. We will have more of these Káffidit talks in the future, so stay tuned for that. And I just wanted to give my apologies, a late thank you to Bat Zorig, who's been here with us, who I forgot to acknowledge at the start. But Bat Zorig is a master's student with Mybrid at University of Uppsala, has been very, very helpful in keeping all of this organized. So thank you, Bat Zorig. All right. With that, thank you again, everyone, and we will end. Take care. Have a good day.
Thanks,
Have a good night.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
You too.
Bye, everyone.